Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Brian Oval, and I'll be your organizer for the session. With me today is Adrian Mayberg. I have a short video I'd like to play just before I name a couple of events.
This could be you.
Yeah!
Or this.
Yeah!
Or this.
Yes!
Or this.
All right!
Or this.
Hell yeah!
Or this. It doesn't matter who you are. We all love winning a prize. Access the Scratch and Win feature on App Plumber and stand a chance to win great prizes. Who knows? It could be your lucky day. Scratch and Win on App Plumber. Terms and conditions apply.
That's it from my side, and I'd like to hand over to our presenter.
Right, morning everybody. This morning we're going to touch on, you can see at the bottom, the topic there, stormwater drainage. It's something that I did a while ago, but given our current situation with water shortages, etc., and the fact that the architectural professionals and engineering professionals are actually starting to pay attention to stormwater or rainwater harvesting, etc., means that we need to make sure that we're on the sharp edge of what's happening as well. So let me dip straight into it. You'll see that under the National Building Regulations, control of objectionable discharge says that no person shall cause or permit sewage discharge from any sanitary fixture to enter stormwater, whether it be a stormwater drain, stormwater sewer, excavated or constructed watercourse. Subject to the National Water Act, any river, stream or natural watercourse, whether dry or otherwise. And obviously any street or other site. No one wants any sewage from their neighbor on their property. Then the next bit is that we're getting to is says no person shall cause or permit stormwater to enter any drainage installation on any site, whether it be yours, whether it be the neighbors, whether it be the municipal line. No person shall cause stormwater to enter that line or that stormwater. The local authority may by notice in writing order the owner of any site to execute at his own cost any precautionary measures required by the local authority to prevent such an entry contemplated in sub-regulation 1 or 2. In other words, no sewage into rainwater and no rainwater into sewage. The problem normally comes around or comes about at his own cost, because if he's paid a contractor to do that guttering, or he's paid a contractor to do his stormwater disposal, then there's definitely going to be some phone calls and emails exchanged between the person that received the money and the person that paid that money. So then the fourth point is, no person shall without the written permission of the local authority discharge or cause the discharge from any water from a swimming pool, fountain or reservoir directly or indirectly onto any public street or public place or onto any site other than the site upon which that pool or fountain or reservoir is actually situated. There are a number of reasons for that. Obviously, the chlorine damages the tarmac in the road surface. You have little bits of water causing havoc with the water that ends up running down the curb or that runs through these little channels here, end up in a stormwater, but it's not enough water to actually run away. So you have little pockets of water in the sumps and catch pits with that chlorine in it, and it ends up becoming a problem. So you can say that, having been told that you can't have that running onto the street, the solution to that problem is actually very simple. If we look at SANS 10 under Part P, it says that where the owner of a swimming bath, pool, fountain or reservoir requires an overflow to lead away any excess rainwater, such overflow shall be designed and constructed to discharge onto the site upon that which that bath, pool or reservoir is situated, or into a suitable surface channel, stormwater drain or natural watercourse. And we'll have a look at those just now. But more importantly, the 410.2 says a swimming bath, swimming pool, fountain or reservoir shall be so designed and constructed that the water from the backwash of any filter is discharged onto the site upon which that bath, fountain or reservoir is situated, or more importantly, with approval, into a drain. So if you have a break like over a gully, or you have a disconnecting feature that would not connect that backwash pipe directly to an underground drain, then that would be the next step. Remember, once you have all the sediment from the pool and the chlorine in that added, you can no longer connect to a stormwater because it contains chemicals, etc. So the solution to that, keeping the water on your site and not running it across the road, is actually in the application of the building regulations already. And then, as per most regulations, any person who contravenes or permits the contravention of any requirement of this regulation, or fails to comply to serve with a notice served on him as per sub-regulation 3, where the council notifies you, shall be guilty of an offence. So unless you fix it up, or unless your client fixes his or her discharge onto the road, you are bound to have hassles continuously, basically. So we look at 10 Part R, which is stormwater disposal in the National Building Regulations. It's something that I feel plumbers have basically handed over to civil contractors, and we've got a lot of companies doing continuous like these aluminium gutters, long span gutters, etc. But it is still part of the building regulations, and it also falls under plumbing for that matter. So the document starts as per usual with all the definitions. So competent person, you'll find that when it comes to plumbing and drainage and stormwater, a competent person is, for plumbers or for plumbing, is the only one that has actually been specified. The others have all got a generic thing that just says you need to be trained and you need to have experience, etc. But when it comes to plumbing and drainage, we have got a definite requirement that the person needs to be registered as a professional to do this design, and you'll see why shortly. So there's a lot of emphasis in this document around interconnected complex. So an interconnected complex is a complex of multiple dwelling units, such terraced or multi-stories complexes, cluster or retirement village type developments, where management of common property usually resides with, but is not limited to, a management body. So it's like a sectional title development. We have townhouses, etc. So you have a lot of dwelling units on one property, but it's managed by a single body. So when we look at normal or general under stormwater control and disposal, stormwater emanating from the roof, paving, and area in the immediate vicinity of a building shall not cause damage to that building interior structure, elements, or accumulate in a manner that can unduly inconvenience the occupant. In other words, we need to have, this is actually, if I can just zoom in, okay, this is actually a perfect example. There you can see it's nice and dry up against the house, and whatever happens here then drains away from that specific building. Stormwater disposal arrangements shall not result in the undercutting of foundations due to erosion or flooding. Drain away from buildings as far as possible under the actions of gravity and not accumulate against or in close proximity to walls. Make provision for the drainage of sites that are waterlogged or seasonally waterlogged. So if you're staying in an area that is known for wet patches and just general soggy soil, there are requirements that you need to make provision for drainage on that site before the building is erected. In other words, you can't put a foundation in there knowing that the concrete in the foundation is going to be kept soaking wet, and ultimately the steel that's in that foundation is going to end up rusting, etc., etc. So you need to make provision for that drainage before it starts causing damage. It needs to be capable of being readily cleaned and maintained. And then just a note that says that stormwater disposal includes roof valleys, gutters, downpipes, where gutters and downpipes have not been provided, other means of ensuring like that slab. Any surface stormwater drains, other words, paving, channels, below ground drains that might be necessary to convey stormwater. You need to make sure that these things are connected. Valleys and gutters, short of telling you that you'll see the sizing of those valleys and gutters should be done by a competent person, civil engineering. I did a little example for the architects a while ago that if you have a 100 square meter roof with a single box gutter, like a sawtooth roof, you have one box gutter with one outlet. The sizing on that outlet is 150 millimeter diameter to make sure that the water gets drained away. So the sizing, obviously, we will get as contractors or subcontractors, we'll get sizing of these box gutters and downpipes just to make sure that we comply. Where required by a local authority, stormwater disposal arrangements provided on site shall discharge into a stormwater system provided within a road reserve or any servitude. The stormwater may discharge onto streets where permitted by a local authority under the conditions imposed by that local authority. You'll see a lot of building plans and a lot of correspondence from council would refer to overland flow. And most of us are familiar with the fact that you cannot block overland flow. So if you're living on a sloped site, you can't have a wall at the back of your property preventing the overland flow from the neighbor behind you to actually build up against that wall and then collapse the wall or cause flooding. We need to provide for overland flow under general or under general conditions for the water disposal. Stormwater disposal arrangements in interconnected complexes. Here we're looking at those townhouses, and you'll see firstly it needs to be designed by a competent person, civil engineering. The stormwater emanating from storms which are likely to occur. We're talking about 50-year, 100-year, different times or different types of flood zones. So if you stay in a specific area, if you're in a 50-year flood zone, then in 50 years you would expect to get flooded or expect damage as per records of previous rainfall figures, etc. So stormwater structures, when designed, shall be of an appropriate degree of reliability. In other words, we want solid setup. Perform with established parameters in terms of hydraulic load. In other words, if you have 10 hectares, you can't just have a 300 millimeter pipe to drain that site. We need to be able to drain into that system, knowing that whatever water or whatever hydraulic load is going to be put on that will actually be in place. We also need to make sure that we have the maintenance bit covered. I'm not going to touch on the actual calculations of those flood zones. Here's more importantly that if we look at terraces created for dwelling units, in other words, if you have a sloping site, these terraces created for units shall be capable of being drained by gravity. In other words, water needs to run away and around buildings without colliding or without running through units. Stormwater shall not be concentrated so as to cause erosion. You see that quite often in townhouses where they have these lovely natural landscapes, but with no provision. When we have flood or flash floods, then we end up getting ground eroded. The velocity of stormwater in a flow on a road edge channel associated with a storm shall not exceed 3 meters per second. That would be an example of a line channel. The others have non-colloidal gravel. It's basically soil without any clay in it. So, rock and gravel with no clay in it, so that it actually lets the water run not just over it, but in between it without any hassles. Then the minimum diameter of pipes in servitudes, unless otherwise directed, shall not be less than 300 millimeters. That is the basic starting parameters. You'll see here, if we look at this, here you can see stormwater structures shall be designed to have sufficient velocity to minimize siltation. In other words, we want the sand to be moving from catch pit to catch pit and facilitate management. The minimum pipe gradient shall be in accordance with Table 1, and access for pipes for cleaning purposes shall be provided at intervals of not more than 40 meters. So if you have stormwater catch pits or grids or curb inlets or any form of access into that stormwater system 40 meters max. So when you look at pipe gradients for stormwater, 300 mil, in a perfect world, you'd want 1 in 80. But you can see that if an engineer's got a big enough surface with enough rainfall in that specific region, he can stretch it to about 1 in 230, which seldom happens because no one wants to live on that last little bit of where it can or cannot work. So you'll see that these things go quite flat. Yeah, you can see a 1050 rock or a concrete ring if you're using those pipe diameters. Yeah, you're looking at 1 in 440. You just need an opening. It's like putting up gutters. If you put gutters level, they'll still run to the outlets before they overflow that 85 or whatever depth that they come at. They would go out the outlets there. So this principle or that similar principle also applies to the stormwater component. So gutters, you'll see that if you go and do a bit of a calculation, you'll see that 4,400 square millimeters, if you use an approved downpipe from an established manufacturer, they all average around 80 mil. And if you take the surface area of that or the inside internal cross-section area of that pipe, they work out to around 4,600 square millimeters. But that is the absolute minimum of a downpipe size. It does not say how many of them you need. It does not say where you need to put them, in which corner, on which outlet. It just says that those downpipes cannot be smaller than that size there. So having had a look at the standard there for a quick brush, if you look at your local authority bylaws, you'll find that the majority of them, I'm just going to flick through them for the sake of saving time, but when you look at the recording, have a look if yours is there. You'll find that most of them end up from the same draft bylaw. No drainage installation can have anything running into that drainage into the stormwater installation. The same thing falls under the drainage and the stormwater. You cannot interconnect them. And even one or two of them will tell you that they need to get the water from the pool away. You can see there's Joburg, Maritzburg and Sunduzi area, that you'll see the same thing. But yet when we get to site, you'll see that there's always that low-lying area where we have people discharging downpipes into the gully, because if they don't, then that flat paved area, you can see even the overland flow ends up in that specific gully there. And then you get the scary ones where they actually remove the rotting eye covers and install grids, and then they complain about smells. Here's another one. And not to forget the guys that do the long span aluminium gutters, or those long span gutters, they end up also finding the closest point of discharge. You can see not very nice. The problem with discharging one is probably not going to be an issue, but in a generally flat area or an area where there's not too much slope or stormwater available, this is what ends up happening to your sewer lines. So the first thing is you overload the sewer lines with rainwater, and it takes, like you gave in your catchment areas, it takes a couple of days for that runoff to actually dissipate. And you can see how nice and clean that water is at the treatment plant. So this treatment plant got flooded out altogether because of flash flooding and rain in that specific area. And you can see how that rainwater just affects the treatment plant. So flooding it is one thing, because it ends up going back into the area where it normally discharges. The issue normally comes in is those basins that you see next to the roadway as you pass your treatment work, those big round ponds. They all have little microbes in them, and they have little organisms in there that help with the digestion of the sewage. They help break down the solids into the silt at the bottom. But by flooding those things, you actually take all of those, let's call them the good hohos, or the good organisms that we need. You actually flood them out. They end up on the grass or on the paving or on the cement around those ponds, which means that the next couple of weeks that the sewage come into the treatment plant, it actually battles to dissolve and to break up the solids in those ponds. It just hampers the whole process. So flooding it is one thing because the water would simply running away, but breaking down the actual working mechanism or the actual format on how you do or how you fix these things is definitely a problem, because not only are you not getting rid of sewage, but you're getting to a point that the sewage that would normally discharge with a safe degree or a safe amount of E. coli, etc., that gets disturbed. And that's when you see the sign go up at the beachfront saying no swimming, or you find out that a local authority has lost its blue flag status and its green flag status because of the blessing that we had where the rainwater became a problem because the system wasn't managed properly. So that is a bit of an issue. And if you're not fortunate enough to have the system overflowing, or you don't have a proper system with a gully and an overflow, you'll see a lot of clean rainwater come through toilets and flood houses and flood basements, etc. Because if it can't get out the gully and it can't get out the manhole in the street, or you are below the street level, you'll find that the next lowest point would, or the next entrance would be an opening like a toilet, like a shower, etc. in the house, and we end up having damage in properties. We get inquiries regularly because if the gully was not installed or the gully was not installed correctly, and these things happen, you'll find that the insurance companies are very tight when it comes to paying out for said damage. So in closing, I'd like to just run through these points. If we can get our contractors and our members and our plumbers to familiarize themselves with the regulations, the standards, the documentation that they need to work to, including your local bylaws. I do quite a bit of training for our OPSA members in various regions. And the first thing you do is you go, guys, who's got a copy of your local bylaws? And in a room of 20 or 30, you'll find maybe 2 or 3 put their hand up. It's something you should have in there, because remember, your bylaws could have requirements in it that cannot contradict your regulations and standards, but it could be an extra over. In other words, in addition to the standards, you might have to do certain things in certain areas in our country. Observe and follow up. When you drive past the house or you do work for a regular client and you see there's a factory or there's a rental property where they've got downpipes into the drainage system or over the gully, explain these legal implications, explain the national building regulations. They send them an email, send them a WhatsApp, been to site, there's a bit of a problem here. This is going to cost you money, or you'll get prosecuted for not complying with the Building Regulations and Standards Act or the municipal bylaws for that matter. Then if you do engage with them, investigate, propose alternatives like rainwater harvesting, like installing stormwater drainage. And in doing all of the above mentioned, we'll be saving failing infrastructure. We don't have to go into details when it comes to municipal infrastructure. It is a general problem across the country, but we could help that infrastructure, or we could help save that infrastructure. It save the environment by not having stormwater and drainage mixing or discharging, because you know what, if drainage can actually get to stormwater, that means at some stage in certain cases, the stormwater can get back into the drainage. So we don't want any of that. And then lastly, like plumbers normally do, the request is to do the right thing. If there's a shortcut available, don't just jump onto that shortcut or take that option. The requirement would be, or the request from our side would be, do the right thing. Explain to the owner that it's going to cost you a bit of initial cost, but once you start harvesting the water and we get a little pump on there, we can you can hose down your pressure wash your paving, wash your vehicles, water your garden, actually make good use of that rainwater. So that would be me. I think it's the first time in a bit that I've actually been on time. So from our side, have we got any questions from the attendees?
We do have one question here. It says, we have a client's property where underground water is flooding this property. We have assisted to install subsoil drain system to direct this groundwater off property to the street. There is no stormwater drain in the street. Water running at the moment onto the street is damaging the street. Council has been out to site but advised there is no budget to install stormwater drain systems. What are we declined to do?
Okay, I've actually worked on one or two of those projects in the past where the client ends up building a sump or building an underground sump. Now, depending on your conditions and where you are in your soil types, you could even venture into these polyethylene ones, the quality ones that can go underground, is create a low point, is create a sump to do your own, and then from there fill up above ground storage. Depending, I mean, if it's in Gauteng, you'd have to build a monster tank. I've seen your rain when it comes down in those thunderstorms. The thing is this, that it should have been dealt with at construction stage when I think it's F4 from the National Building Regulation says you cannot construct there until you've actually provided drainage on waterlogged sites. So my suggestion would be to just have a chat to an engineer or have a chat to a competent person, civil engineering, possibly do that drainage into a sump and then have a pump with a float switch that could pump it back out to above ground tanks that they can reuse or recycle, maybe do cleaning or do washing of vehicles, watering of gardens, etc. with that water. But yeah, you'd have to create your own low point in the absence of the stormwater system from the local authority. Create your own low point that you can drain this water to, because long term the damage to that building, foundations, walls being soaked, etc., is going to far outweigh the cost of putting an underground tank to collect that water away from that building. I hope that answers the question.
We don't have any other questions at the moment.
Okay. So
I think
if there are no further questions, then all I'd like to say is, guys, enjoy your day, keep safe, and we'll chat again soon.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Adrian. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for also joining and learning during the session.